Hey everybody, this is Cameron from Noxious Anonymous. Today I am joined by one of my favorite people to ever grace these podcasts. We have Lost in the Movies Joel Bocko here, and this is the Twin Peaks Thought of the Day for Wednesday, February 17th, 2016. How's it going, Joel?
It's good. Glad to be here.
Well, before we get into any Twin Peaks news or potential spoilers or just discussions about, the series itself and the upcoming season 3, there is something I want to address before we get going on all that. And that is on Saturday, I uploaded a video to this YouTube channel in which James, one of the frequent contributors to this podcast, and I discussed the fact that the DUGPA forum, if people don't know, it's kind of like it's sort of like a David Lynch message board for all of his movies and works, and within each movie there's subgenre topics and stuff like that. And I've only posted on it 3 times in the last year. I never really was a full-blown user, even though I was registered. I barely went on there, but whenever I did go on there, I was actually really impressed. Until I would say maybe the last month or so. But whatever complaints I had about the site, obviously James had a lot more because he was on there, probably every 10 minutes for the last 5 years. But one thing I want to address is on, I think it must have been Thursday. I mean, I don't know because I wasn't on the DUGPA forum, but I think on Thursday, the entire message board got taken down. And I started getting message upon message from people that watch the show saying, hey, DUGPA's down. Do you know what happened? And I didn't. Then I started getting message upon message from other people who, don't know each other, aren't in the same town, aren't in the same city. And they were saying, hey, I'm hearing wind that David Lynch and or, Twin Peaks Productions had something to do with it because some of the things that were being posted on the board were taken by Deadline to write their last 2 articles. Now, at the time, it wasn't clear to me whether somebody was tipping off Deadline or whether Deadline was just coming on to the DUGPA forum itself and getting the information and writing up their own stuff. Because I had so many people suggesting or telling me that they were hearing wind that Twin Peaks Productions had something to do with this, not so much because they were against people on message boards saying things, but because the information had been leaked to the mainstream press, that they may have reached out to the admins at DUGPA to take down the message board site, the entire forum. Now, on that podcast, if you rewatch it, I'm actually saying, hey, I don't understand why you would have to take down the entire forum. Why not just take down the spoiler threads if that's what they had a problem with? Why delete the Elephant Man threads? That doesn't make any sense because there's a lot of great posters on there. There's a few crazies on there as well, which is what I was talking about when I referred to some of them seemingly appearing to have a wank fest on there in terms of trying to see who could come up with the most spoilers or the best set photos or the set locations, etc. But you're going to get that with any message board. That's not new. It turned out that obviously David Lynch or Twin Peaks Productions did not have anything to do with the board being pulled down as far as the admin is saying. According to the person, and there's no reason to disbelieve that person, that they didn't have anything to do with the forum being down. And that makes sense to me because why would Twin Peaks Productions want, anything about the grandmother being pulled down? I mean, my feeling was not the fact that they went in themselves and ripped it down, but more of hey, we're having a problem with this spoiler section, and the admins were like, shit, we can't break it apart, so they just pulled it down. That's what it seemed like to me. Let's just pull it down and put it back up when we can fix it.
DUGPA wanted to make sure that there was nothing illegal on there because leaking a script and stuff like that would actually violate, contracts people have signed and stuff. So that's why he froze it. took the time to go through everything, make sure that there was nothing like that on there, and then restored it once that was just cleared up. Like he was working on a lot of stuff, and he couldn't take that. He couldn't like just say, "Oh, take an hour and look." He had to like put it on hold till he could get to it. So that was the message they had. Pretty much all I know about it.
Well, let me.
Sorry, keep going.
Let me discuss that statement that Doug wrote on there. He or she wrote at around 5 a.m. on Thursday morning, I received a few messages that pointed to a fan who had shared details relayed from a crew member, which had subsequently gotten picked up by a Deadline article. So what that says to me is somebody reached out to this person and said, hey, nefarious business is taking place on this site. And then they write, truth be told, lately I haven't had much time these last few posts between moving a new job, 4-hour commute. Nevertheless, I quickly logged on and found that I was behind several pages of posts, and it would likely take me at least an hour to read. Having only had a few hours of sleep the night before and a back-to-back day ahead of work for me, I realized that in the event someone had posted something nefarious like a copy of the script or stolen footage, the only responsible thing would be to go ahead and disable the board until I had more time to figure out what all the fuss was about. That's it. Simple as that. No one asked me to pull the site. After evaluating there was no illegal activity, I brought the board back up. Now, just real quick, I'm just curious. If there was nothing bad on the board, right, then what are people writing to the admin about?
Well, there was somebody who shared, this is just what I know from people saying things on Twitter, so it's not like special information,
right,
but just what's out there. There was somebody sharing information that of stuff that was going on or whatever. I think casting news or something like that. It was some sort of like special, like who an actor was playing.
Okay.
And as has been the case since the Snoqualmie shoot, people would say if they felt something was a little too sensitive, that it would either people wanted it to just go the people who shared it originally from the cast or the crew or just observers on the set or whatever, because the Snoqualmie ones were pretty open, they would just want things to go maybe person to person and not get out and certainly not be leaked to articles. So they would go to the private messages and they would share stuff there. And so that was going on. It wasn't like a secretive thing. It was like, hey, PM me if you would like to know more. I can't put it on the board. So people would PM, and they could use their own judgment, too, of like, okay, this is somebody I know is trustworthy, and I can share this little bit of information. And it wasn't anything like, illegal, like scripts leaking. It was just things people had observed or heard from people, stuff like that.
This is interesting to me. So there's a spoiler thread, but people who are afraid of posting real spoilers just PM them to each other.
Well, yeah, I think it's more about, how would I put this? They don't want to compromise people, if somebody shared something with them or something like that. I'm guessing that's what it is.
Well,
because, yeah, you're right. It's like it's a spoiler thread already. So, but anyways, point being, in this case, somebody DM'd somebody who was a kind of a new user, and I guess it was not of very savory character, as much as they leaked it to Deadline. And so there was a recent Deadline story about, I think, some actors and how the characters they were playing were related or something like that. And that came from somebody who was sort of lurking on Doug Pine, got this person to PM them the info. So again, this isn't like, top secret info. This is all the stuff that people have been saying publicly that I've just been following and picking up, like, oh, okay, so that's what's happening.
Right.
So yeah, that's sort of the context of it. And it had been going on for months and it was fine, but I guess in this particular situation, the info sort of got into the wrong hands of somebody who put it on Deadline. It was sort of an aspect to the idea of like, okay, here's something interesting. You can share it with a few fans who can keep it amongst themselves, but please don't, make this a big news story or whatever. And then that person went out and did that. So.
Well, and that's why when people were writing to me saying that Twin Peaks Productions had a hand in this, or they think they had a hand in this, that's why it made sense, because Frost and Lynch came out with this whole hashtag, keep the mystery alive. And now that it's been clarified by the admin Doug that it was not the case, you have to understand why that rumor swept through the internet so fast is because it made sense. Because they didn't, I mean, I understand we're living in the internet age and there's message boards and spoiler threads everywhere, but the adamance of so many of the Twin Peaks fans to keep the mystery alive, to not talk spoilers, even though there are spoiler threads, there are people who are still so sensitive because it is a mystery. It's a very personal thing to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It's not Batman v Superman. It is something that people hold very dear. And so you could see why, even if it wasn't the case, that's why the board got pulled down, you can see why so many people would believe that. Doug went on and wrote, a few things I also wanted to clarify, and I believe this has to do with answering some of the things brought up in the last Thought of the Day video. He or she writes, the spoiler thread was created not because I want to have the series spoiled for myself or anyone else. It was created to simply be an isolation thread, isolating discussion of Twin Peaks spoilers to a single spoiler thread. I'll get back to that in a second. Allows members of the board to continue to use the board for positive discussion, I'll get back to that, of Twin Peaks between now and the new series premiere without having to worry about stumbling onto any spoilers without any warning. This is the same reason you will see no spoilers or any articles about returning cast members on our front page. Those who want to avoid spoilers simply don't click on the thread. Problem solved. Now, it talks about isolating discussion of Twin Peaks spoilers to a single spoiler thread. I think there are now 3 spoiler threads now going on Dugpa. So it's not a single one. There's a season 3. There's a casting one, I think, that you created. No,
that was Ross, I think.
Okay.
So, of the list of all returning actors all actors. Yeah.
Okay. And then there's another one too. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's at least 3 spoiler threads on there. Which, whatever, I don't care. But
they're all marked, right?
Yes, they are. They are. But the thing is, though, is that he's talking about isolating this, right? That so that other people could go to other areas. But if you look at the other areas of the forum, they're not really being touched. What's being touched are the spoiler sections on all 3. Those are the top 3.
You mean with the activity? The
activity is through the roof. And like I said, I understand, we're living in the 2016 and there's message boards and spoiler threads, but to me, why I believed that Twin Peaks Productions had a hand on this, besides the fact that I was getting message after message after message from people, not trying to convince me, but just saying, hey, did you hear about Dugpa? But when you start hearing the same thing over and over again, you start to go, okay, there is a common denominator here. And so then when I asked James, I said, what do you know about this? And he goes, I heard Twin Peaks Productions had a hand on this. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to talk about this because the videos are called Twin Peaks Thought of the Day, not Twin Peaks Episode 1. It's so we talk about not just the episodes, but we talk about rumors and news and speculation and funny theories and, potential spoilers. I know some people have gotten on my case about, oh, you say you don't like to talk spoilers, but then you talk spoilers and stuff. It's like, I don't really like to talk spoilers, and I also have been very careful as to which things I do talk about, and when I do, it's usually in a spoiler section of the video, and I give plenty of awareness. And also, this is a Thought of the Day video. It's a news video as well as an informational video as well as an entertaining one, I hope. And the idea is, we want to talk about what's going on in the community. And so some people on Dugpa felt like, well, I don't understand. Like, you talk about news from Dugpa, but then you criticize Dugpa. And it's like, you can, enjoy something and say, hey, this could be done or tweaked a little bit better and everything would be fine. It is okay to be critical. My main issue was that whenever I went on in the last couple months, whatever, and then since the production began and kind of scroll through, especially up in Snoqualmie, it seemed to be like a race of who could get what first. We got a set location, we got pictures, we got information, and I understand everyone's really excited, but it also seemed like it was a way for people who lived in around Snoqualmie to not just dispel information, because that would be fine. It was like this relish of like, you know, we got the goods, you know.
So your criticism was more people on there than necessarily the admins or the way it's being run. Just you felt some of the people in the community you didn't like the way they were presenting this stuff.
But I would feel that way about any message board.
It wasn't so much criticism of the site as a site as of certain people on there.
Some people were saying to me, well, it's just been mostly casting discussions. And I get that. Except for the location shoots and stuff like that. Because people will be like,
but
hey.
You didn't think that they should be deleted or suppressed or anything like that, but you just wish people would use better judgment, or am I misunderstanding?
No, and I'm not saying like the forum or that spoiler thread should have been deleted. That's to me a different question. My thing was, did it need to exist? Like,
did the spoiler thread need to exist?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to. Like, if people are PMing the information to each other anyway, then maybe they should be PMing the spoiler stuff to each other.
So you think they should have basically suppressed spoilers on the site then? It should have been a policy.
I'm operating under the assumption on Saturday that Twin Peaks Productions had something to do with this, because that's what I was hearing. And,
right.
And the admin for DugPub put up this statement yesterday. So we're talking like close to 5 days of no information. Now, if that statement, if you went to DugPub and on Thursday, and that was the statement you saw, we're not even having this conversation right now. You know, there was no attempt to get the truth out there. It just was able to linger. And so for 5 days, rumors went wild. And, you know, and after you hear the same rumor over and over again from several different people in several different places and several different jobs, some of them in the Hollywood industry, you're going to go, all right, well, maybe there is some truth here. And it's understandable truth if it was true, which it's not, but if it was true, it would make sense.
When I was on there, it seemed like it was mostly, there were like two things. There was like speculation based on, you know, some information that was out there. And then there was, like, I guess, specific things that we're seeing. So it was like, there would be the specific, I guess you'd almost call it like the material and then the speculation that would like come from that material.
Right.
So like, for example, somebody, and I had no idea this was even a rumor, so I'm making a hypothetical, but somebody would see like, you know, a trailer with the name Judy and Jennifer. Obviously that didn't happen as far as I know, but like that would be the material. And then the speculation would be, Jennifer Jason Leigh is Judy, but it would always be kind of like evidently people piecing things together rather than claiming, oh, I've got an inside source that says such and such is such and such.
Well, it also came
from... one of the things I kind of liked about the way it worked there was that you could sort of, you could suss out what was actually documented fact or observed fact according to people. And obviously, you know, somebody could just make something up, but you know, because it was people who had been on there a while and stuff, you could kind of be like, oh, okay, this is reliable. So you could gather little details that seemed pretty well nigh to be confirmed. And then you could distinguish that from people just sort of stating things and putting things out there and saying this is happening. I think as more people got involved over the past few weeks, maybe months, there were more people who were like new to the board saying, well, I've got somebody who says this. And then at that point you have to kind of go, okay, well, do I trust this person or don't I trust this person, and that type of thing. But I just want to digress.
I just want to add that also the Jennifer Jason Leigh as Judy came from IMDb because she's listed as Judy in the
somebody added, IMDb is like the least reputable source of anything, I think.
Exactly.
From what I understand, it's like Wikipedia basically, just whoever has access through IMDb Pro or whatever adds stuff, and it's like IMDb is almost like the last to know anything.
Exactly. So anyway,
like you probably see Don Davis listed as playing Major Briggs in the new series on there.
Well, anyway, long story short, so the video goes up, and People have their own thoughts and opinions about everything, positive, negative, whatever. And it's just the way it goes on YouTube. And so yesterday the board gets back up, and I was telling James over the weekend, like, hey, I'm hearing that the forum's going to be back up, and I'm curious to see if there's going to be any adjustments. Again, we hadn't heard any update, so I didn't know if the spoiler throw is going to be back up or whatever. And anyway, the board went back up yesterday, and I got a message from James yesterday evening saying, yeah, can't get on. I've been officially banned. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. Now, I hadn't been on in a while to check my messages, and like I said, I've posted 3 times maybe in the last year. I'm barely ever on there. So I sign in. I've been banned from DUGPA. And I was kind of overwhelmed by that, because for somebody to ban me, that means that they had to, like, seek me out to find me and ban me officially. And they don't just ban you where you can create like another username. They ban your entire IP. Obviously, they're pissed because they feel like in some way I insulted them. And even if I did insult them, I mean, shit. IMDb is filled with the most horrid posts you've ever read. And yet IMDb doesn't say, all right, you're off. So...
Well, DUGPA has a pretty strict policy, I know, because I've gotten into conversations on there. I think it was with the same person that James got in an argument with, actually, which is a whole other topic. And at a certain point, the admin came in. I'm not saying this applies to you, obviously, because you weren't posting on there, but or at least not frequently.
No.
But they would come on and say, okay, just a reminder, like, this has got to stay on topic. It's got to blah blah blah, and kind of cool off. And if people didn't, they did. I witnessed people get banned, sometimes just temporarily. But they are pretty upfront about that. It's not like 100%. It's not like a forum like IMDb or wherever, where it's just like kind of like the Wild West, like you can say. Like they don't censor things beforehand, but if topics kind of go off and things start to get heated, they will intervene. So,
but you're talking about people you're talking about people who actually post on the forum. I am not even posting on the forum, and yet they went out. No,
I know. I'm just saying in general, when you were comparing it to IMDb, I think that's sort of one of the key things to sort of remember is that it's sort of run very differently in terms of... Yes,
it's an elite...
It's very much more at the admin's discretion.
It's an elitist club.
You can come in, but there are rules of the road. And I'm not saying you violated those or you should have been banned or anything, but I just think in terms of perspective, it's good to keep in mind with DUGPA, they're not presenting themselves as operating the way an IMDb would or Twitter or whatever, where they have very loose rules. They have very strict rules.
Yes, but I think...
I've been sort of told at times, okay, like, you got to back off the Margaret Thatcher or whatever.
Okay, but I
can't even remember. No, right, exactly. I'm not saying that applies, but
I'm saying that they didn't reach out to me. They didn't say, hey, they didn't give me a warning. I don't even go on the site. I'm just... but if I want to log on, damn it, I want to log on. And I'm not posting anything. I'm not trolling anybody. I just find it funny that if somebody makes a video in which part of the discussion is a bit of a critical dissection of a particular section, the spoiler section, that they feel like that is proper to go in and ban you. And that's why I say elitist club. I'm not saying that like everybody on there has an exclusive thing, but I'm saying if you're kicking people off who aren't even posting, right, and banning them because, oh my God, you got your feelings hurt by something I said or something James said, and I'm guilty by association, whatever the case is, I think that you're insane.
It's presented as basically, this is my site. You're invited to come talk about Twin Peaks, but they're my rules. And and if they don't want you there, they're not going to have you there. Basically, the thing that I do appreciate about it, and I'm not necessarily in this situation because I understand what you're saying. Why you weren't even posting on there and everything like that. But I think the good thing about DougPo when that policy works is that it's not. You're going to escape a lot of the stuff that you do get on IMDb and those other boards that also serve their purpose. The conversations tend to be much more focused. They tend to be more productive. The people who post there tend to be. So I think that's why that kind of policy exists. Now, what you're talking about, that may be like an excess of the policy, but I think however it should be resolved, I don't know. It sounds like maybe you don't necessarily want to go back at this point.
Well, no, and again, it's it's not the question of like, well, Cameron, why do you want to go back on there when you weren't even posting? It's not about that. It's about I don't like being banned when I didn't.
You don't like being exactly, yeah.
I don't like being kicked
I guess
out.
what I would say is if your goal is to sort of get back on there or reconcile or whatever, then you have to keep in mind. The way to go about it, it's almost like I would almost put it in like, how would I say? It's almost in like sales terms. Like if you're talking to somebody, and even if you feel like that person you kind of just have to go with what, you're the one presenting something to them, and you kind of have to go along with whatever.
Okay, Joel.
Their attitude or their whatever is, and that's how you make the sale or whatever.
I don't give a flying shit. I am
right. And that's fine. That's fine. But I'm just saying.
I'm not somebody.
They're not on IMDb, and they're not.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just saying that like, it'll be a cold day in hell before I come crawling back on my knees to people who just casually banned me because something I said on a podcast that upset their little feelings.
Right.
So. No,
which is fine. Obviously. You have your audience, and I would almost say, I was kind of thinking about this earlier. In a way, it's frustrating for me because it's like, I love Obnoxious and Anonymous, and I love DougPo, and I've kind of been on both and been involved with both for a long time. They both hugely shaped my involvement in Twin Peaks. But in a way, it's almost not surprising that it ended up being sort of a follow, because there is a totally different sensibility, where you guys are very much more about, sort of the open, you don't even edit the podcast, it's like, we're going to be as open, as edgy, whatever as possible, just go for broke. And that's great, and that works for what it works. And then DougPo's thing is, we're going to be much more streamlined and focused in terms of weeding out, this and that, and that's going to be the kind of thing, and that works great for what they have. But they're two such different mentalities that it doesn't, unfortunately, surprise me that in the end there was kind of a clash. And I would hope it doesn't sound like it's going to be. But a lot of the stuff you're saying, I agree, and I think, like I said, I wish, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but I wish could be some sort of, reconciliation, because I think even though
there isn't a problem
are so different, there's a compliment there.
And that's the issue.
I can't get on board with the idea that their spoiler thread was more, was doing something wrong that like Twin Peaks Worldwide at the end of the day wasn't. I think they both personally did an excellent job guarding people from spoilers, but also sharing information that was available. I think DougPo, because it's multiple people on a forum, and and all of them have different sources of information and stuff, they're obviously going to go a little more deeper. They're going to get a little more off into the weeds and stuff like that. But the fundamental question, I think, is, do you share information about the production or don't you? And I think both of you guys decided, in my opinion, rightfully, that you were okay sharing some info, and then within that, you kind of can decide where you draw the line in terms of certain things. But at that point, you've already made the fundamental decision that you're okay with info from the production being presented to your readers. And to me, the distinction between whether it's already made news or if it hasn't yet is kind of. I mean, I get where you're coming from. Like, you have to report the news. It's like,
and that's why I never even talked about it on the podcast before, because I'm not going to call out Dugpa. But once Dugpa went black, and these talks were being said that Twin Peaks Productions could have had a hand in this. Well, that's why you have to go, okay, well, if 2 and 2 and it's equaling 4, this is probably what happened. Now the difference is between the two is people post on Dugpa, that then gets translated into mainstream news, let's say Deadline, whereas I see a Deadline article and talk about it. Deadline doesn't come to my podcast to do their articles. They go to Dugpa to do their articles. And that's the difference, is that people aren't coming to me to create the news. They're going to Dugpa, getting the news and creating the articles. And then when I see the articles, I'll discuss them. So in a way...
That's true, but I get that you're saying you're not the initial source of any information.
Right.
And I understand that distinction, but it's almost kind of two spots on the same river. You know, you're still... I think if the question is about Lynch and Frost not wanting the information to be out there, and whether or not to what degree you take that and respect that, or feel like it's, me personally, I feel like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. It's like, I wouldn't be necessarily, I don't know what I would want to pass along if I was at the initial end of that. But I think the real distinction to be drawn is, as he said, if there's something illegal going on, if there's a script leak or something like that, and that, was kind of where they drew the line, and that's a fair place to draw the line, I think. And then anything beyond that, to me, it's kind of different shades of gray. You're either saying absolutely no spoilers, we're not going to talk about, anything, other than maybe, public casting news, but Showtime or somebody says it, publicly, okay, fine, but anything beyond that, we're not going to share. Or you say, to whatever varying degree, I'm willing to pass on info, even if it's info that millions of people have already seen. If you're passing on the info, you are, essentially willing to share stuff from the production that Lynch and Frost may or may not want out there. So I think at that point, I can't get on board with the distinction between the Dugpa spoiler thread and the worldwide. I think they both wisely went about sharing spoilers.
But let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, though.
You,
if somebody posted a scene from the script on Dugpa, do you think that post would be pulled down in the spoiler section? If someone
no, it would be deleted. It would be deleted because it would be, from my understanding, that would actually be illegal.
But if somebody was outside and took video of that scene, or did a camera where they, just rapid fire pictures, basically made a mini storyboard of that scene using like 200 photos, I don't think Dugpa would have pulled down the photos. So what's the difference between a script versus the
maybe
pictures?
There might be a distinction between a closed set and an open set. And what they shot in Washington, that was an open set.
Right. And that's why I reported on it, because it wasn't because it was shot in front of a live neighborhood. Anyway, but the thing is, though, is that whether you guys out there listening agree or disagree, like I said, if Dugpa wants to ban me, that's their right to do that, I guess. But to me, I feel it's a little foolish on their part, since one, I was never on there posting. I wasn't trolling. I wasn't the one posting the videos. I don't know. I find it a little strange that they would actively seek out my account to ban me just because they affiliate me with James, or maybe they just don't like me, or whatever it is. I just think it's really silly. Wait till the show comes out, ladies and gentlemen. Wait till the show comes out. You're going to have people like Collider Movie Talk, and you're going to have the Stream TV Studios, AfterBuzz. You're going to have maybe 200 shows on YouTube doing after shows for every Twin Peaks episode when it comes out. You're going to have to listen to every 18 to 25-year-old twit out there going, oh my God, like, oh, this show's so weird and surreal. Believe me, this is all the calm before the storm. Twin Peaks, something that I hold very dear, very personal. We are going to be bombarded in the next year. Once this show comes out, we're going to have so many people that we don't want in our community using David Lynch, Mark Frost creation as clickbait over and over and over again. That being said, Joel, let's move on. We talked about this long enough. So it's been a long time since we talked, but we got Laura Dern cast in Twin Peaks. And
in Star Wars, apparently.
Yeah, which was
a big surprise.
Which is great.
I'm trying to picture Laura Dern, and I mean that's cool, but
yeah,
I'm having trouble sort of like envisioning her somehow. I mean, she was in Jurassic Park, so she's done the blockbuster thing, but
right. Ashley Judd.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Good to see
right?
that. Yeah.
And that's also fantastic.
What a ridiculous cast, Jim Belushi. Like, who would have thought that this? It's just like, but you would have thought, because look at Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, where he just throws in friggin'. Okay, every time I see Inland Empire, I completely forget that Mary Steenburgen is in it.
Oh my God.
That scene comes, which watching the house, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I remember William H. Macy, I remember Juliette Binoche, but I never remember that Mary Steenburgen is in that. Virgin or Bergen, I don't
and
even know.
Until you said that, I just did too.
Literally, I've seen it maybe 3 or 4 times, and every time I get that same, like, wait, what?
Joel, do you hate yourself?
So yeah, it is true. No, we'll discuss that when we do the commentary episode. But Inland Empire grows on me. The first time I saw it, I was like, I wouldn't say I hated it, but I was not. I would say I was pretty mixed to kind of negative on it. It didn't really work for me overall. I loved some stuff, loved the rabbits, loved certain scenes. I always loved that barbecue scene for some reason. Like, that to me is like perfect Lynch, like quintessential, like, but like taken to the nth degree. But every time I see it, I like it more and more. And I think too, getting back into Twin Peaks, it really, there's so much resonance there with that movie. Like, I think the 2 biggest influences on Inland Empire are Twin Peaks and Transcendental Meditation. I think if you kind of dig into both of those subjects, it opens up a whole lot of weird, seemingly random stuff in that movie to be like, yeah, okay, I kind of see where that's coming from, in his subconscious or whatever.
Right. Okay.
Anyways, back to Twin Peaks.
We have quite a bit to get through, so let's just kind of go through some of it as quick as we can, because I know you have some other topics you want to talk about as well. And that is, what about this idea that Naomi Watts, some people are saying that instead of Laura Dern playing Diane, that maybe Naomi Watts is playing Diane, and that could factor in the Mulholland Drive aspect, because
Diane's Selwyn.
I'm
trying to think if I ever thought of that before.
And that Mulholland Drive began initially as Audrey Horne Goes to Hollywood. So is there, and of course you are also a big proponent that Twin Peaks and then Twin Peaks and Lost Highway are connected. Me personally, I hear Naomi Watts, Laura Dern, and Cheryl Lee is in this, and this is obviously the 3 most important actresses that David Lynch has ever worked with. I mean, I know Isabella Rossellini, but
yeah.
Maybe. No, but in
a different way. Yeah,
no, but
the 3 most important blonde actresses.
Yes, but whenever Lynch is in an interview and someone asks him who's the best actress he's ever worked with, he always says Laura Dern.
Did he? I gotta see it. I gotta see that, because I find that surprising that he would single. Because he seems so sort of ecumenical with it.
No, he says it.
He never wants to kind of single anyone out or something. Where did he say that? And
Okay, I could be wrong. It's either in the Blue Velvet or the Wild at Heart, retrospective making of. Okay. It's in one of those 2.
I mean, it's not surprising. I think if it's gonna be anybody, it would be her, because he's worked with her 3 times.
Yes, but
and
he also
certainly Inland Empire,
Yeah, but he also brought back Cheryl Lee 3 times, right? Oh, actually, 4 times. 4 times.
Oh, you're gonna throw the Mulholland Drive thing in?
No.
Glenda the Good Witch. Oh, okay. Yeah, Glenda, Maddie, Laura, and then what? Bringing Laura back to life.
Yeah.
In Fire Walk with Me.
Exactly.
But always other than Wild at Heart, it was always within Twin Peaks.
True.
You know, I think Laura Dern is the only one.
But
it feels like Laura Dern's the only one he went like back to of the lead actors. It was like, you know, he had McLaughlin and then he didn't use him anymore. He had maybe Cheryl Lee, if you want to throw those films, and didn't use her anymore. He had
yeah, but Cheryl Lee was cast only
whatever. Justin Theroux just concentrated in that area late in his career. But like Laura Dern, it was like 1986, then 2006 she's back. So it's almost like she's the only one who kind of survived the cyclical,
yeah, but
or maybe not cyclical.
But Cheryl Lee,
short-term way he uses his actors.
Cheryl Lee was cast to just play the body of Laura Palmer, and then he took her and brought her on as an actress, and then brought her back for the movie and stuff like that. So like Twin Peaks became a lot about her.
Actor.
You know?
Yeah. And it's funny, too, like, to me, the Inland Empire seems like it's so much about Cheryl Lee and Fire Walk with Me. Because when you read about that, but, like, as much as Naomi Watts and Laura Dern and Bressolini and all those get, like, oh, yeah, they were great. Like, I've never read anecdotes from, like, almost any set that are as, like, sort of astonished as the crew members. So it's not even cast members. It's, like, the DP and the sound mixer, like, oh, yeah, man, that shit was intense. Like, we were like traumatized by watching her do that, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it's like for that to be, I feel like that was a big sort of reference in Inland Empire when he has, you know, the actress sort of rescuing the character in a way and all this other stuff, bringing the character to life, getting taken over by her.
Right. And on the other side, we have, well, anyway, what I was saying before, real quick, the fact is Laura Dern, Naomi Watts, and Cheryl Lee are in it. That says to me that Lynch is not only preparing this Twin Peaks as, you know, whatever Twin Peaks, the you know, new series, it almost feels like this is a culmination of all his work together, and that this is going to be like the greatest swan song ever. Because to bring back all the actresses, you know, that he really made a mark on him, especially over the last 30 years, you know, it's going to be, this is going to be a personal thing. I would say there's going to probably, in my opinion, probably be moments that make you cry a la The Straight Story. I can almost imagine that.
Yeah, it's definitely like the summing up of his entire career,
right?
In a way,
right? And then
already Inland Empire kind of hinted at that, but in a very, you know, abstract, abrasive way,
right?
And in a much shorter form. Like this actually can be all. It can be everything from Inland Empire to Straight Story to, you know, hell. I mean, we can get into it in a second, but maybe even Dune with some of the the
sprawling characters,
rumors and things.
Yeah,
no, we'll get to it.
Are you telling me?
Are
you telling me that
I guess we're already behind the spoiler bump. But
are you telling me that the worms from under the ground in Blue Velvet are going to become the spice worms and come out of the ground? That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, if the whole thing ends with Cooper riding a sandworm
into Twin Peaks. This sounds like a James conversation.
Exactly.
Now. It's the sandworm's going to open its mouth and James is going to fly out on his motorcycle. You know.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the thing. So there's a couple other things I want to touch on before your news, and that is something that I have forgotten to talk about in the last several podcasts, so I apologize. But David Lynch is going to be back as Gordon Cole. That's fantastic. Also, I briefly mentioned on the last podcast, but I want to talk to you about Warren Frost is coming back as Doc Hayward.
90 years old,
which is fantastic.
Him and Harry Dean.
Yeah, obviously no word yet about Michael Onking having a turnabout face, and nothing yet.
I don't think he'll be back. It sounded pretty definitive, you know.
Yeah, and
I mean, he said it ambiguously, but I don't get the feeling that it was a wink or a. I think he's really not coming back, you know.
And that's a shame because
it makes sense because he lives in Hawaii. He clearly does not. Like, if you read Brad's book, he comes off as, like, a guy who clearly couldn't give any fucks. You know what I mean? Like, he just is like, yeah, I'm not nostalgic at all. I don't blah, 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 blah. So it sounds like he was like, oh, cool, yeah, Twin Peaks, I'll come back. And then for whatever reason, got to the point where it's like, you know what, I'm good. Like, that's the sense I got.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad, because his relationship with
I just hope
Cooper was
not the new Truman.
No, that'd be awful.
That would be stupid. New sheriff, great.
Yeah.
New Truman, can't.
Yeah,
still can't get
but you know what, though?
That idea.
I'm worried that the new sheriff will feel like the new Taggart in Beverly Hills Cop 3, you know, when they just, like, you know.
I did not see that one.
Where John Ashton didn't come back for 3, so they just cast another actor, not as that character, but just that role.
Yeah.
You know, that type of role.
Well, he's so good that it'll be its own thing, if they let it be its own thing, which I think they should.
Yeah.
How about the Donna thing?
That's interesting.
People have been chattering about that lately, going, is that legit? I think Donna has to be. People are going, oh, they don't need Donna. Donna was such a, you know, if they're going to go by who was important on the original show, like, people may not like Donna, but she was hugely important on the show.
And if your theory is
definitely in that key core group.
And if your theory is correct, which I believe is your theory, correct me if I'm wrong, that part of this might be about, or at least a scene will be about Cooper and Laura leaving the lodge, because I really think the Lynch is going to go for a happy ending with this as much as possible. I don't think he's going to...
Like in the real world as their physical selves, you mean?
Well, if
Laura is basically resurrected?
Yeah. I almost think that because at the end of Fire Walk with Me, we have Laura and Cooper together in the lodge. Yeah. And if Cooper can leave, so can Laura.
Yeah. I wouldn't be shocked. I won't be shocked either. I said this is one of those things I said early on, and I'm going to stick by it. I'll actually be more surprised if there's no sort of alternate reality at play than I would be if there is. I think there will be. I think it's totally in line with what he's been doing since Lost Highway. I think it's the next logical step for Twin Peaks after, starts with this semi-normal world, and then you get psychic dreams, and then you get inhabiting spirits, and then you get, by Fire Walk with Me, you're kind of in time travel mode because she's like speaking to Laura from the future. It's just like, so they've already kind of broached all those supernatural fields, and I feel like and it's also a way to surprise people, even though we're predicting it now. But I think I really do feel like we're going to be seeing. In fact, I would probably say, to me, it seems a little more likely that there's going to be some sort of bit of like, hey, who's this woman? We're going to track her down, and he ends up, in some small town in New Mexico, knocking on a door, and like Laura Palmer answers it or something.
Right. Well,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
almost that versus the actually in the lodge coming out. Like, I don't know. I think it's going to be Mulholland Drive level of, whoa, what level of reality are we on?
Well, that's interesting.
Maybe not right off the bat, but at some point as we watch it, I think I'll be shocked if it doesn't go into that territory.
It's interesting that you say that,
where
though,
things
because
are like contradicting and different.
Well, one thing I brought up earlier to somebody, I said, Spielberg did Schindler's List, and he did Amistad and Private Ryan and Munich, and then he tried to go back to Indiana Jones, and it was a disaster. And so when you look at Lost Highway... I still haven't seen that one.
Well, I don't know when or if I will.
Well, anyway, but you look at Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Straight Story, Inland Empire. For David Lynch to just kind of go, I'm just going to go back and do Twin Peaks. You can't do that. It's been 25 years of change. It's going to be of maybe a similar feel at times, but it's going to be the new Lynch. But here's the thing.
100% agree.
But it's still, with Mark Frost writing it, at least I feel like we'll have a good basis. Whereas if Lynch was writing this himself, holy shit, that would have been like, it would have been Inland Empire 2 with our cast.
Oh, yeah. But I do have to say about Mark Frost, the interesting thing is I see their roles in Twin Peaks as being a little bit reversed from what people often say, because the common line, and there's some truth to this, is Mark Frost keeps it grounded. He keeps it referring to itself and sort of remembering and passing the baton, or, he keeps it grounded. And Lynch goes off into the stratosphere, and it has to be restrained. Actually, if you look at what they specifically added to the series and how they approached it, I think in some ways you find the reverse, because you find that Mark Frost was often willing to push things forward to the point where you kind of forgot where you'd been. Like, nobody would ever see Wind of Earl coming if you just watched the pilot, you know? Or Josie's whole thing and all the stuff. Maybe Josie's thing, but certainly not Wind of Earl, certainly not, you know, a black and a white lodging. So it's like he was always sort of pushing it forward, and I think that makes sense because his background was serialized television. And the whole thing with that is, you know, you're constantly developing the story and moving it forward. Like a season 5 of a show is going to be way far away from season 2. But Lynch, on the other hand, it comes from movies where it's a self-enclosed unit. And, you know, so with Lynch, he's the one who brings back the red room, the little man, the clean corn. Like he's not bringing
back the red man now.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. I mean, if he can gag him and get him to shut up for 2 seconds.
Exactly. He's posting pictures on his Facebook page of a woman blowing an alien. I saw that.
I love what he brings to Twin Peaks. I hope he's back, but yeah, he's got a kind of.
I love it on Doug Puss. Somebody said, "God damn, that Facebook page Twin Peaks Worldwide has gone downhill." They posted a Michael J. Anderson's post of an alien, of a woman blowing an alien, and wow, that site has really gone downhill. And I'm like, we shared it. I didn't share it. James shared it because 1, he thought it was funny, and 2, Michael J. Anderson himself posted it. And one of the things that Twin Peaks Worldwide loves to do is call attention to what people in the Twin Peaks community, including the actors, are posting on their Facebook pages for fun. And it's like, this guy turned down Twin Peaks, but he's posting pictures of women blowing aliens. This is interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. At a certain point, I'm like, I need an MJA filter. You know, it's like after. Anyways, let's move on from that.
But one of the things I wish.
To bring it back to the point though, so it's kind of funny. Mark Frost, I think, in some ways, is almost more willing to go off the map and into it. Now, he said when the show came back, we've got to stick to that clear path. That was a mistake we made the first time. So I definitely don't think, you know, they'll be as willing to kind of, you know, certainly they're going to stick to one narrative through line. I think that's the big lesson he learned from Twin Peaks was, oops, that was a mistake to say the Laura story's over. And now we're going to become something else under the name Twin Peaks. Like, he gets that was a mistake. But I think he's still into throwing in new elements and getting crazy and going off kilter. And so in a way, I think they balance each other. And I think they also kind of share some similar sensibility of being willing to get sort of experimental. So, and the way I think that's going to tie in with the new series is it seems, because of all the different places they're shooting it, some of which are not going to be stand-ins for Washington State. Like, just no way. They're way off geographically.
Right.
It seems like this is going to be more globe-trotting Twin Peaks. May have touched on that the last.
But that's not Twin Peaks.
But that's the thing. See, that's what's so interesting. So
now that's not necessarily my feeling, okay, right? But that is what I'm hearing. A lot of people writing to me, like, Cameron, if they're filming all over in all these places, and we're supposed to be going to Nevada or Texas or wherever we're going in the story, isn't the whole point is to be back in Twin Peaks? All right. I mean, obviously, we don't know.
See, that's what I think. I think that won't be the point.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to surprise us. I think that may be one small point. I agree with you. There's going to be parts that definitely, probably at least one whole episode, if not a stretch, that are like, back in 20. I feel like part of it's going to be getting back to the town. I don't think we'll start there, but I could be totally wrong.
I mean, hell, I mean, a lot of Fargo doesn't take place in Fargo, you know. But real quick, I just want to just bring it back to something else. You were talking about Donna, and my feeling is if Laura Palmer is going to be a focus again, which from all indications she will be at some point, either as a character or as an enigma or whatever, somehow Laura Palmer will become a focus again in this new series. And how can you have Laura without Donna and her family? I mean, in fact, when Fire Walk With Me was being made, which is one of your favorite Lynch movies, if not your favorite one, Lynch cut out every goddamn character in that movie except for Bobby, James, Laura's parents, and Donna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
That is how important she was.
Those are the people closest to her.
Right. That is how important Donna is.
He was even willing to recast Donna because it was like she has to be in there.
Exactly.
You know?
I mean, they didn't even try to put Audrey Horne in the movie. It just was like,
yeah. Which, it's wise on several fronts because she's not necessary to Laura's story, and also because as much as I think Laura Flynn Boyle is underrated on Twin Peaks, I still think, and maybe it's the nature of the character more than the performance, but you can have somebody else play Donna. You can't have anybody else play Audrey Horne. That would just be ridiculous.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Now, one thing you brought up in your email to me this afternoon is Annie's possible fate. Now, before you go off on this amazing diatribe about it, I'm sure, I just want to say, if Heather Graham does not show up in this series, I will be sorely, sorely disappointed. If she can make time for the Lifetime Flowers in the Attic movies, she should be back in Twin Peaks. If you're having James Belushi and Ashley Judd and Harry Dean Stanton and people showing up, Heather Graham can give us 5 minutes.
Well, we know that we're going to find out what happens to the character. That's a given. Somebody, Daniel from, he writes into the Sparkwood 21 podcast and posts on Doug Paw a lot. He had a really, I thought, pretty clever idea, which I'm sure you will not like as you're a Heather Graham fan. I like her too on the show. But the last line of Twin Peaks is, "How's Annie?" Mm-hmm. What if the first shot of the new show is her gravestone? That answers that question pretty clearly, you know?
That's an Annie Blackburn hater if I've ever heard one.
Right, but it is true. That would answer that question. And if Heather Graham is not coming back, that's one way to tell us right off the bat, you know? And it is a direct connection to the question that ended the series. Now, personally, I'd like to see her back. I don't know. It seems odd to me because I don't think we've seen people really play coy about not being on the show. People say, oh, they did but it's been anybody who's back, they pretty much come out and wink and nod and let people know, you know? I don't think we've encountered anyone yet who just as apparently convincingly as she did, well, I don't know, I'm not on it. Looking forward to it, though. Like, it was like she hadn't even talked to anybody about it. Right. So that was a little bit surprising. So I am I'll be pleasantly surprised if she's back, put it that way.
Well, I hope, I've said this before on other podcasts, so forgive me, everybody, but I'm bringing this in just because it's the Cooper Annie thing. I hope on the other side of the spectrum that we get, with Audrey, I hope we get a reference to John Justice Wheeler in this circumstance. I would like her. Now, I don't know if her dad is dead or paralyzed or older or however, but I want her being the main parent. I want her looking after Johnny, maybe her dad, maybe her mom's died, I don't know. But I want Audrey.
You want her still in town, then definitely.
I want her still in town.
And done somewhere else.
No, I want her running the hotel and being a cold-hearted bitch because...
You want her to be Catherine, you were saying, right?
No, I want her to be her dad. And I want her to be hardcore because, Cooper's gone. John Justice Wheeler never came back to town for her, and she's now running this hotel.
Let's hope.
What?
I said, let's hope he never did.
No. But I'm saying if you are thinking that this guy, your first, the guy you first had sex with, whatever, is going to come back to you, and he doesn't, and we have those beautiful shots of her in the series at the end when she's like sitting next to the fireplace in the red dress, and I just think that I would love to go 25 years later. Here is what. No love has come to her. She's still, and she has decided she's not going to be cute and coy with guys anymore. She's now going to be just hardcore. And I want her to be the Michael Corleone of Twin Peaks. I want her to be like, hey, I'm never going to be like my dad. I'm going to do this and that. And then at the end of the series, she was kind of like, Dad, I want you to teach me the business and that type of thing. And now we see what 25 years of business and no relationships has done to her. And then Cooper comes back to town.
Maybe. I don't know. I've heard that sort of idea, and I've heard that she goes off and becomes an FBI agent or something. I'm not on board with either one. Maybe I just want to be surprised by Audrey, but it's just something, I don't know. Something about the running, and maybe it's just because it's connected to the season 2 stuff that I don't really like that.
But you have to address it somehow. I mean, I'm not saying you have to go back and address
the thing they have to really address is she was possibly maimed in a bank accident, you know?
True.
I think that's kind of number one on the list of what the hell happened to Audrey. But I
just want to be like, what do we do?
I want her to escape the trap that she was in as a character. I don't mean as like a plot trap. I mean as how they used her in season 2. I just think, and from the beginning, as soon as she was drugged up in One-Eyed Jacks, really through the end of the series, she gets good moments here and there, but she's lost the interest she had. And she can't, obviously she's not going to be the same character she was in season 1, 25 years later. But I want to see her put to more interesting use.
Yes, but a heroin overdose would change you.
But it didn't change her the right way.
No, but I just want to see. I just want to see a scene in this new series where she's like talking about a development deal, and someone's like, "But there are pine weasels out there," and she just goes, "Kill the fuckers."
They taste great with a little. What does he say?
Exactly. Okay.
It tastes great roasted.
Now, one of the things you wrote to me is how Showtime might re-air the preceding episodes. Are you suggesting they're going to show them out? About that. They're not going to show them out of order. What are you talking about?
No, not out of order. Like if they're going to, because we're getting up to. I don't think it's going to be much more than a year, if that. Before I think they're going to show it early in 2016. I saw 2017. So. They're probably going to have to show them like every day or a few times a week or something like that, rather than like once a week running up to the series. They're going to have to kind of marathon them, I mean, they could even air a marathon, but I think that would be stupid because anybody who wants that experience can get it on Netflix, and most of the people watching Showtime aren't going to. And plus, they got other Showtime shows. So that would be ridiculous to begin with.
Well, what if they did this?
Obviously, they're not going to do that. But
what if they did this? And they're probably not going to do this, but let's just have fun with it. What if they aired the pilot, right, of the original series, in 2017 on February 24th, and then every episode is the next day. And then
that would be fun.
And then after the show's over, the new series begins on the date.
That would be fun. Of course, they would run into trouble because they get that 3-day gap.
Right. Well, you pause for 3 days.
Yeah, but then they'd have to air 6 and 7 back to back too, because it's all one day.
All right. Well, they did that once with the
Sunday Night Movie. It's doable. It seems a little.
They're not going to do that. They're not going to do it.
It would be. They wouldn't. It would be fun, but it would be a little logistically complicated. Put it that way.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a possibility they might not even run the episodes.
What's that?
They might not even run them.
Well, they said that was a big part of the announcement. Like, I was surprised they made that big of a deal out of it. In this day and age, they know people can see them anywhere. But they were like, in anticipation of the show, we will be running every episode up until it was like part of I think a 1-paragraph or 2-paragraph announcement that was like right up there, the things they were excited to do. So it's like, I got to believe that's still happening. I'm just wondering if they don't have a set date yet when the show's going to be available, how do they know when to start doing that if they're going to do it on a week-to-week basis? Because you got to be ready 6 months out, maybe, to start running those. If you're going to do one a week, because that's 30 weeks of material, more than 60. You got to be 7 or 8 months out. So, it's plus then you also run into the risk of you get into the late second season and people start to drop off. People who are totally new to Twin Peaks and, this is what happened. They're not going to go on Wikipedia and realize, David Lynch wasn't involved and now he's going to be. They're just going to go, the show got bad. I don't want to see the new one.
There is a possibility. There is that possibility.
We've got to squeeze them together so people can get through it, or I don't even know.
There is that possibility once you get to the James and Evelyn stuff that people might be like, I'm not tuning into the new Twin Peaks. What the hell is this shit?
Exactly.
I mean, of course, James would be there, with bells on, just hoping that there's more Evelyn stuff going on. All right, let's move on here about how do you think Cooper's quote-unquote possession will be represented. I think we've already seen it in some of these pictures. He looks like a cold dude, man.
Well, and I guess the question I'm asking is he going to be that way all the time? Or is there going to be a Jekyll and Hyde thing, which, if that's the case, how do you explain the good Dales in the Lodge? If they have him like that all the time, how are they going to make it sort of dramatically interesting? Because if you just have a character who the whole time is a bad guy pretending to be a good guy, and you're just watching him do stuff, it's not nearly as interesting as a character kind of struggling with himself, but how can they show that with the way they set it up? So they're it's like they painted themselves into a corner, and I think everybody agrees they figured something out about how to tackle this material going forward that probably none of us have even thought of yet.
Right.
But one other idea that occurred to me that I found kind of interesting, and like I said, missing pieces especially, but also the end of the finale, they seem to make it pretty hard to believe that this Cooper is going to be able to, act like the other one, or that it's, any semblance of good Dale is left in there because it's so sort of single-mindedly maniacal. But it occurred to me an interesting twist for Lynch to put on it. Clearly a retcon, because I don't think it was something, anybody had in mind. Well, actually, I might take that back in a second. Would be for the idea that somehow what we're seeing is not just completely a result of Coop going into the lodge, but it's something that's always kind of been there. And the moment in the lodge is when he realizes it and when we realize it. Mm-hmm. That there's been somehow Bob has been with him, not just tormenting, from outside, but maybe inside of him somewhat. And, there's been an evil Dale that's been present. I'm not going to get into, we'd laughed about this before, the whole, he killed Laura or something like that doesn't make sense. But it's interesting to consider, given Lynch's interest in the themes with Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive and all this other stuff where the dark side has always kind of been there with that person, and at a certain point it's like a light switch flips on and they realize it. Maybe that's what the lodge was. And the main thing that sort of clues me into that is that Log Lady introduction to the last episode, which was shot 2 years after the finale. So Lynch had a lot of time to think about it and how does he want to present it. And she says, and now there were two, or were there always two? And then, she goes on with the rest of it. So I thought, that could be interesting, and that could give them a way out to kind of say, well, yeah, he's still kind of the same Cooper because this dark side was there, but now we're aware of it and we're actually going to see what it's capable of. But again, the difficulty with that is the good Dale's in the lodge and he can't leave, and all those scenes we get where it suggests a total separation between good and evil, with good totally cut off from the real world. So that's where.
What about that theory that sent Lynch on Lynch about that if season 3 had gone forward, it was going to be a thing of what if Cooper had read the diary and got to that point of Laura saying, the good Dale's in the lodge, then he would know not to be stuck in there.
Oh, okay, so like an alternate forking path kind of thing?
No,
where what we saw on the show is not necessarily what followed from the series?
Well, because Harold Smith destroyed...
from the film, I mean?
Well, Harold Smith destroyed the diary, and Cooper was, trying to, sift it together when Audrey came in and said, my dad slept with her, with Laura. Right. But the thing is, though, if we go by the timeline, if Annie's telling Laura Palmer to write it down in her diary, that means that he had that right in front of him, that he was going to be trapped in the lodge. And David Lynch... Well,
there is a weird thing about that. It takes place after she gave the diary to Harold, so it has to be in the other diary. Because Lynch says in the interview, I know for a fact she wrote it down in her diary. How could she have if the diary is with Harold? So if she actually wrote it down, as he says she did, they'd have to find a way around that. I mean, did she go back to Harold and say, "Oh, one last thing, let me just jot that. I know I said I'm probably never going to see you again, but let me just jot this down in the margin. Okay, see you later." You know what I mean? Like,
well, not only that, but there's that scene in Tim Hunter's episode where they get the missing page from her diary that says, "Tonight is the night that I die."
Yeah.
So how did Harold?
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
How did Harold Smith have it?
I guess he had to go back to Harold.
She keeps
sneaking if they'll actually
in.
try to rectify some of these continuity errors, because there's I'm of two minds about it. On the one hand, sometimes it seems like David Lynch not only doesn't want to fix continuity errors, he wants to create new ones. There's that. But then there also is the side of him that actually does go back to tie things together that you wouldn't even expect to care about, so.
Right. But he did in the missing pieces still did not put in the shot of the red rose on the ground when James pulls away. And that really irritates me. Really irritates me because that would
maybe he's saving it for 2017.
Maybe.
There might be some footage from there that we're going to see, because when he edited that, he knew he was making the new series.
That is true.
So
he
may have artfully hedged and said, I'm going to hold on to this scene. I always thought a really weird thing to throw in would be if he really wanted to play with alternate realities. It would be hard to do this and not make it seem really cheap. But what if he really had the Ben murdering Maddie footage in there and he threw it into the new series?
That'd be awesome.
That would be so ridiculous. They'd have to come up with something really. But I mean, it would be cool. Of oh wow, what a twist. But they'd have to come up with a really good justification for that.
One of the viewers on this podcast, I don't know his or her name, so I'm sorry, but except they go by the name Pulp Gallery 1. They wrote, and you're talking about duality with Coopers, but they wrote yesterday with this interesting thing. And this is, we all know this, but sometimes it's very cool to see it all in one place. And that is, they write, I think Lynch is fascinated by the actor's soul underneath and the role body and what motivates us to behave and act as we do. There are a lot of dual roles. For instance, Twin Peaks has Sheryl Lee playing Laura and Maddie. We also have Catherine and Tojimira. We also have Dennis.
Catherine and who?
Tojimira.
Oh, yeah.
We have Dennis and Denise. Lost Highway, we have Patricia Arquette playing Alice and Renee. We have Fred and Pete that swap roles. Mulholland Drive, we have Diane and Betty, Rita and Camilla. Inland Empire, we have Nikki and Grace, and Susan, Sue, Blue, and Justin Theroux as Devin Burke and Billy Side. And then they finished off by saying all roads will lead to Twin Peaks. It's kind of haunting to think about, wow, that's so many double characters.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, it's so true. Yeah, and even if you want to, I mean, and that's only on the most
basic.
Sort of the casting level. Even.
Right.
If you go into each character, and then you go into characters who are paired, they're not played by the same actor, but they're almost, you get a lot of, obviously the Donna Renette thing and Firewalk with Me, where they're kind of mirrors of each other, and they're mirrors of Laura. Or each of them is like a manifestation of one side of her, and then you've got Sandy and Dorothy in Blue Velvet,
right?
And then you have the characters who are sort of have duality themselves, where you've got Kyle MacLachlan struggling with that in Blue Velvet, and you've got Laura Palmer is like the definition of a character duality, and then of Leland Bob. Mike. I mean, there's so many.
There is no duality.
So many instances of in Lynch's work.
There's no
characters who split or are combined.
But there's no duality in Frank Booth and Bob and Bobby Peru.
Yeah, they're pretty single. I mean, I think, yeah, you could make a case that Frank is obviously, got the pure evil going, but he has this kind of sensitive side, which is where it comes out of, like when you see him crying at the Dorothy's performance. Bobby, it's tough. About all you could pinpoint for Bobby is maybe the Vietnam thing haunted him. They really don't give him much nuance.
But at that table, he does mention One-Eyed Jacks. Just saying.
Yes, he does.
Now,
in a very gruesome and grotesque image, as I recall.
Yes, he does. In fact, I have to just throw this in here, and then we'll move on to another topic. But look, I love Firewalk with Me. I love a lot of the missing pieces as well. But I have to say that I'm disappointed in one aspect, and that is we have an R-rated David Lynch movie.
Right, and we don't see that. I remember you saying this. We don't get to see One-Eyed Jacks.
We don't get to see One-Eyed Jacks. We get the pink room scene. Okay.
But you know what? That's better in a way because One-Eyed Jacks is the PG-13 rated version of that in itself. So yeah, you could go back and say, oh, and here's the other stuff that's going on. But it's almost better in a way to say, so okay, One-Eyed Jacks was the TV version of this. Pink Room is like the real version of this, so the R-rated version. You know what I mean?
I understand. I just would have loved to.
I get what you're saying.
No, but I want to see. I think,
yeah.
Yeah, but I just wanted to see Blackie throw Laura out. I wanted to see that scene.
Well, there's so much stuff from the diary and from the whole backstory. It basically it's interesting, and the missing pieces give you a little bit more, but really I kind of feel like the only missing piece that gives you any sort of diary sense of Laura's interactions with the community is the Hayward House scene. Mm-hmm. Because even the scene in the diner, she's not interacting with anybody. She's just passing through while they have their own stuff. So that's funny to me, too, is like people for years would say, if those deleted scenes had just been in it would have been, the community and Laura, and it would have made so much sense. Out, you'll still find people trying to say I love the missing pieces, but when you watch them, I just watched them last night for the first time in maybe a year, and it's like they're so on their own. I think most of them are like really cool, funny little vignettes. Like it's so funny. Like this, I laughed out loud so many times watching that. It's really the comedic side for sure, but you watch it and you never have a question why 90% of that was cut from the film. It has absolutely nothing to do with anything. And so for people to still kind of cling to this idea that there's like a bigger picture, that it's the Josie Pete scene, hilarious, but it's a blackout sketch. It has no relation to anything else.
I can't even believe that Lynch shot it thinking that was going to be in the movie.
He knew. I think he just genuinely shot it for fun. And same thing with the Andy Lucy. That was supposed to be the night Lars getting married. Can you imagine the film Firewalk for Me would have been if, we get the montage moving through time and she's with Bobby, shot with James, and everything is so woozy, and you're just on this relentless death trip to the end of Laura's life, and it's like one of the most intense things Lynch shot, and all of a sudden you're just like, hey, my aunt has her. Andy? Who am I talking to? It's just like, what? How could that in a million years have fit in that? That would be like putting a scene from Seinfeld in like the climax of Schindler's List.
I do think
absolutely no sense.
I do think there are some.
So I haven't watched the fan edit yet, but I can't imagine how this stuff goes together.
You can't even. Listen. I won't watch the fan edit, and this is why.
I'll watch it someday, but I'm not rushing into it.
My reason for it is because they don't have all the pieces. Lynch purposely did not release
all the pieces, and he purposefully made the missing pieces. Like watching it again last night, hammered it home. This is such a different movie. Like, people act like a movie is just a story. No, like there's so many stylistic decisions,
and
that make the missing
he's
pieces
repeating shots
180 degrees.
He's repeating shots and lines in the missing pieces with alternate takes. That means you have to decide. You have to cut stuff out.
You have to choose. Yeah. And they're alternate takes because they're so different. Like when you get, a Dissolve and Lars moving in on Bobby and the music's playing and there's all these extreme close-ups of her and him crying. That's a totally different take on that scene than one single master shot, not a drop of music in it.
Right.
Just ambience, room tone, little sound effects, keeping your distance, watching. Totally different take on that scene.
Right.
Even though it's the same dialogue, the same actors, So I just, to me, it's like mind-boggling. But yeah, to get back to your point, I think, One-Eyed Jackson or Josie, like he clearly chose at some point not to make a film about Laura and the community. And it wasn't like he cut those parts out. It was never that, it was never even designed as that film. It was designed as Laura's last days, intercut with some standalone sketches about the community and like Nadine skinning a deer and stuff,
Right.
Like it wasn't ever designed. There was no point in the conceptualization of that project where it was intended to be Laura's interaction with the community. And that's an interesting decision, that he made basically because he was able to get a fair amount of the actors to come back. So theoretically,
he made
something more like that.
A tragic, horrific story about a young girl who was raped and murdered by a man who was inhabited by a spirit from a planet of cream corn.
Well, yeah, we don't know about the planet of cream corn thing. I'll be surprised if that gets confirmed in season 3.
If the opening credits is cream corn
you,
pouring down
Snoqualmie
Falls.
It always makes me think of Eraserhead, though, and that's like, he pulled off a man in the planet in that, so I guess he could do something with it, but
yeah.
I'm not holding my breath for that.
Yeah. Like I said, if the opening credits is cream corn pouring over Snoqualmie Falls, we're in for a ride.
Yeah, and I am looking, but it's funny, mentioning the humor in Missing Pieces, it's like, talking about Twin Peaks a lot, and I definitely am drawn to like the dark, mystical stuff, and but there's so much just freaking fun, and like in a certain way too. Like there's a certain Lynch sense of humor that's only in the Lynch episodes, and I enjoy the humor in the other ones as well. I'm not just saying it's only Twin Peaks humor is only, but in the ones that Lynch directs, you get this absurdist humor, which to me is just the funniest shit ever. Like all the stuff in episode 9, Lucy with the fly and the cream, the pig, what is it? The smoked cheese pig. And then episode 2, there's a certain style of Lynch humor, which is like, it's not cute and quirky. It's like, it's the one part of his sensibility that I think, makes you think, okay, there's more to it than just the sort of the corny Boy Scout. Like he's got a very like hip arch sense of humor. He's really good at, and the stuff in Firewalk with Me with like Sam and Chet is like the perfect example of that,
And that is why I feel
I'm looking forward to some more of that as well. And
that is why I feel like in the Missing Pieces, just real quick, I think it's almost crucial to have that scene between Cooper and Sam Stanley in the movie. Because I think it would have tied in a little bit better between the first half, Cooper coming in before we get to Laura. I think it's only a minute long, for God's sakes. I mean, throw it in there. And also, it's a way to get Kyle and Kiefer Sutherland together in the same frame. Why wouldn't she put that in the movie? I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, there's definitely little bits and pieces you could do. I'll tell you, I think my favorite character / actor in the Deer Meadow part of Firewalk with Me, it's always pretty consistently Harry Dean Stanton. But lately, especially after watching Missing Pieces again, it's like Kiefer Sutherland's kind of up there for me. Like pretty much every line reading he has makes me laugh out loud. Almost without fail. It's so good.
Now,
so funny.
One thing you wrote in the email is you said you had some possible spoilery stuff to discuss with me. So
yeah, at this point we've gotten into all the spoilery stuff. So this thing, which you probably heard, did you and you're fine with me putting this out there?
I don't even know what it is. Go ahead.
It's not going to be like Cooper kills Audrey or something like that. So apparently there's going to be a nuclear explosion.
Oh, I've heard this.
Peaks.
Is Cooper going to jump in a fridge and fly away like Indiana Jones does?
let's see, like I said, it's avoided, but yeah. So there's a fridge, a flying fridge. Kate Blanchett is a Russian in Aliens. Someday I'll see that movie. But anyways, yeah, no, Twin Peaks. Yeah, my thinking is there's going to be a 50s flashback. But then again, Lynch, has he ever done a flashback? He did want to start Firewalk with Me with a 50s flashback, which also, I just want to put this out there. For a long time, when him and Engels, or when Engels talked about how they were going to start in the 50s with the Eisenhower inauguration, I finally figured out what the hell he's talking about, I think. I think he's talking about we would be in the Palmer household or something in Twin Peaks, you know, when Leland's a little kid or whatever, and Eisenhower's getting inaugurated, and then all of the people in the house are like, oh, I Love Lucy's having a baby, and they turn the channel, and then, you know, you get some shot of ants or insects marching to the Formica table, and you know, there's somehow that has to do with the infestation of Mike and Bob, you know, something like that. But when I first heard that, all I could think was, so they were going to shoot an inauguration scene like in Washington D.C. with like actors playing Eisenhower and like Nixon and all that, like at the White House and all this, and I was like, man, they were really going to go far afield with that movie.
Yeah, and yet sometimes the movie feels pulled back from what it could be too. I think one of the things I like about The Missing Pieces is it shows that Lynch was willing to push the movie in certain areas, and I think the movie would have benefited from just a couple of those missing pieces back in the film at one point. But anyway, but yeah, the nuclear explosion, who knows what that means? You know,
Do you think he would put a flashback in there? You know, Los Alamos or something like that.
I don't know. I'm thinking. He loves
the 50s.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I was talking with someone earlier today about this. Is like one thing about Firewalk with Me, and I don't want to get on a Firewalk with Me tangent, but I just want to I'm trying to talk about the new series, but using Firewalk with Me as sort of a basis. If there is another disappointment with Firewalk with Me, and again, I like the movie a lot, and it's okay to think about things while overall praising the film, okay? But you have to sometimes like go, well, what if they had done this? And one of the things I think about is, and I think is a missed opportunity, is why do The Last 7 Days of Laura Palmer? Why not do Laura Palmer's story? Like, you know, I would have, even before she was born, I mean, what if the movie had opened with the Eisenhower inauguration and a little boy watching TV, and he goes outside and plays, and he's at the house at Pearl Lakes, and we see what happened to Leland Palmer. You know? Well,
I mean, that would have been a totally different movie, you know?
Yeah.
Like we were talking about. There's almost like, that almost would have been, well, I guess that kind of would have been the movie we were talking about, where it's Laura interacting with the community, you know?
Well, it would have been
a more global kind of look. It would have been kind of like The Diary, but film.
Yeah, but I mean, I would have loved to have seen, you know, Laura at 12 years old, laying in bed and looking down at the bottom of the bed, and Bob is there for the first time. I would have loved to have seen Laura cheerleading with Bobby playing football. I would have loved to have seen things like that, and not just, you know, what we got.
Then you lose the intensity, though. Then you get, because it's what we have now is very much like Mulholland Drive. Maybe not so much Lost Highway. Maybe Lost Highway is a little more sprawling. But I think I always kind of come back to Mulholland Drive structurally as the film that's kind of most similar to maybe Twin Peaks and Firewalk.
Well, because it was supposed to be Twin Peaks 2 as a TV series.
Right. Well, but even just the structure where, and I guess it is kind of sprawling in that first half. But it's not, the timeline isn't sprawling. I think it's hard for me to think of a Lynch film where he really, I guess Elephant Man maybe, you know, where he just is telling a broad story over many years or whatever. It's usually like he hones in on a specific stretch of time. It's like very contained, you know. He doesn't do epic filmmaking in that sense.
No, and I agree with you.
I don't know. I don't know how it would. I don't know if it would really play to his strengths to have like a 3-hour, you know, sprawling story of this child in time, because then it's almost like a biopic, you know, where you're telling you're telling somebody's whole life in a movie. And, I just watched Malcolm X the other day, and I like that movie, and I like, a lot of biopics, but you do run into that problem of a person's life doesn't really fit the structure of a film.
Yeah, but you could do it like the opening.
So you end up kinda,
but you can do it like the opening credits of like Born on the 4th of July, where you have just kind of like a montage of scenes of her early in life, and then go do the last week of Laura Palmer.
So you're just saying, you're not even saying you want the whole film to be that. You're saying you wish there was a little bit more background in it.
A little more background.
Maybe even just a montage.
A little more background, a little bit more humanizing the character of Laura Palmer.
But we get, and I mean, I know it's not an official part, it's not a visual thing, but I feel like the diary really does give you that in a way,
Right.
But I'm kind of glad that they picked up right where it left off, rather than, well, they don't exactly, because she says, I know who Bob is, so clearly it overlaps a little bit. But it more or less, the movie says, okay, the diary went up to this point, we're going to take it from here. I kind of like that, because I think it's, each one sort of plays to the strengths of the form. Like a literary diary is the perfect way to get all that information about Laura and to get her life. Like really, that's going to be much better handled by somebody writing it on a page from a first-person point of view than if we're just getting scenes here and there and so forth,
Well, yeah, but remember,
like a film that like uses that weekly structure, that's going to play much more to the strengths of a film. If Firewalk with Me was a novel, it wouldn't,
But remember when I
quite worked as well.
When I interviewed Jennifer Lynch and I asked her, I said, what did you think your dad was going to adapt the diary? And she said, my father never read the diary.
Yeah, which is understandable in a way.
It is, but it is
to read.
It is, but it's also interesting because that meant her dad didn't give two shits about continuity.
But then the funny thing is, other than, and even the Bobby killing thing, you could say, oh, he killed two people, there's not too much contradictory stuff in there, as I recall. The big contradiction in terms of a book contradicting a movie is the Deer Meadow thing. I don't remember if they call it Deer Meadow in the book. I don't think they do.
Well, I don't know if it's in the interview I did with Jennifer Lynch, but she told me that whenever she got too close to revealing that Leland was Bob, that would be the page ripped out. Now
that's interesting, because I just read a Wrapped in Plastic interview with her where she talks about that, and I still feel like it's hard to get a sense, did she actually write those pages and she took them out, or did she stop herself and say, because like the way she discusses it, she almost goes back and forth, where one moment it sounds like, oh, okay, she actually literally wrote stuff that exists somewhere that they didn't, and then in another moment it sounds like, oh no, she's saying, she said, well, I can't go into this area, so we'll just make this will be a ripped out part or something. So I wish, I wonder if there's like missing pieces out there of the diary.
But isn't it interesting that
actual literary missing pieces?
But isn't it interesting that Laura Palmer's diary which was a big seller, that is kind of adhered to and kind of looked at as a basis for what Fire Walk With Me would be. Then when you get to Scott Frost's book, the Cooper, My Life, My Tapes, that thing is just shit on, and like we're not even gonna adapt that. We're gonna.
I find it interesting though. There's a lot of interesting ideas in there.
No, I know, but I'm saying like they just Lynch completely ignored.
Yeah, and it was never re-released. They made a big hoopla about re-releasing the diary, and Lynch and Frost both wrote forewords to it. But My Life, My Tapes just kind of languishes.
Right, and because it was Cooper and Sam Stanley investigating Teresa Banks, and it's just like that thing was just completely discarded for continuity, at least.
Although that's a pretty small part of it, I think the big reason I think there's a few reasons. One is it came out when the show was no longer popular, So cult fans bought it, but it wasn't going to be it wasn't going to sell like the diary was. First off, and then secondly. It deals with a lot of material that just isn't, in retrospect, even when Firewalk With Me was unpopular, Laura's story as part of the show was still kind of looked upon as like the show's height, that was, so the diary kind of complemented that, whereas the Cooper stuff, it deals with Wyndham Earle all of that stuff.
All the fascinating
it feels
stuff.
Much more. It feels like stuff that people didn't care as much about remembering.
I cared.
And then also, it's funny. Yeah, I find there's a lot of interesting stuff about the book that I really love to dig into and consider, especially with the ring. And it's so funny because it's got to be a coincidence. I can't imagine Lynch in a million years read that book, or if he did, he probably threw it against the wall in disgust because its version of Cooper is so different from his, But at the same time, it gives a lot of background to the ring on the show, the one that Cooper wears, which makes it feel sort of semi-related to the Owl Cave / Teresa Banks ring.
Right.
In terms of connecting people to spirits and having something to do with like trauma and female victims, because his mother is the one who gave him the ring, and then it's taken away when he. So there's all kind. I don't want to get too into it, but there's all kinds of interesting stuff with that book.
Well, do you think? Okay.
But yeah, it seems like it's the unloved, core. I mean, it's funny. I remember that stuff, and then if I go back and read it or listen to somebody talking about it, it's like, oh yeah, there were like chapters upon chapters of his like sexual adventures with hippies in the '60s, and like, he gets voodooed in like an island somewhere and goes on a drug bust, and like you kind of forget those parts and just remember the mystical stuff. But
well, let me ask you this. I'm gonna try and wrap this podcast up in a little bit, but I don't know if we've talked about this or not. But do you what's over or under 80%? Okay, and that's a pretty big high number to start with. Think it's gonna be more than 80% or less than 80% that David Lynch and Mark Frost will address, maybe not entirely explain, but address the Owl Cave ring?
Yeah, I think so, just because, for two reasons. It became a really big part of the mythology with the movie, to the point where it's actually the crucial moment in the movie is, in a sense, her taking the ring.
Right.
That's, if you can pinpoint one climactic moment to that movie.
Which apparently was an insert shot.
Her seeing the angel.
Which apparently was an insert shot.
Yeah, I find that pretty plausible. I could find it plausible for it not to be too, but John Thorne, I think, makes a lot of good points about the fact that you don't see her or Mike or Leland or anybody in the shots where she's taking the ring. You don't need to, but you could also easily see them shooting it with one shot of her ring on her finger, all one shot, her face in the ring. You don't get that. So it's interesting, yeah. It could be. So I think a big part of the mythology. And the other thing is, if the missing pieces is canon, the word I'm sure Lynch doesn't care for, but, call it what you will. If it's part of the universe, and, like you said, he did cut things out. Maybe it was footage he had lost. They did claim that there was some footage that he had lost along the way. But that ring is right up in there in new and kind of odd ways. You got, scenes of the little man and Cooper with the ring, some of which overlap with what we saw in the movie. You got Teresa playing with the ring big time on her finger while she's talking to Leland and Jock, getting ready to blackmail Leland. He throws in that shot where Laura's staring at the ring in slow motion and her face whites out. You got the nurse and Annie at the end. There's a ton of the ring. Probably more ring in Missing Pieces. Well, maybe not, but it's in Missing Pieces, almost as much as it's in Firewalk with me.
What's really interesting?
It didn't drop that motif at all.
I mean,
then the montage on the Blu-ray, I don't know if he had any input on that, but they chose the ring to symbolize Firewalk with me. That disc, the whole menu is about the ring. So I think he's still got something to say about it.
It makes sense. I mean, my God, you're sitting there watching the movie and they make such a big freaking deal about this ring, and you're like, I never even heard about this ring until the movie.
Exactly.
So
my favorite theory from Dougpo was that it was by this guy Fernanda, or actually it might have been a girl, but this person Fernanda. I probably mentioned this to you last time because I'm remembering like giving the same preamble. I'll say it again anyways. This idea that the ring, it doesn't look like an owl, because it's upside down, it's inverted, and it's much narrower. It looks nothing like an owl, really, which is true. Their suggestion was it looks like a ear of corn, which it does. And I thought, that's interesting, because it's basically saying this ring has something to do with pain and sorrow and collecting Garmonbosia. And, so that's a cool idea. So, yeah, I definitely hope we see the ring again. And my only hope is that they don't... I don't want them to explain it too much or make it too reductive, because, I think the ring is a lot more interesting than a lot of people make it out to be. And a lot of people are just like, it signals doom, and it means that they're Bob's victim, which is kind of boring to me. I don't think that's...
But you know what?
And I also don't... I think that's really inconsistent with the way it's used in the movie repeatedly. Like, in fact, oftentimes Lynch goes out of his way to show us the ring at moments where Bob does not have the upper hand. And then when he does, we don't see it. So it's like, not just the moment where Laura takes it. Whenever we see Teresa with the ring, she's got power. And whenever we don't see her with the ring, which is pretty frequently, Lynch either shows us her hand without it, or more often he buries it, like her hand is under Leland. And it's no accident. Like, she walks into frame with the ice tray in a way that, and if you pause it, you can see for one or two frames that the actress is wearing the ring. But he goes out of his way to make it so that you can't see it until the moment where she realizes who Leland might be, and then he brings it into frame. So that's no accident. I don't know if he was thinking it out, like, intellectually, but something in him was saying, we don't see the ring now, and we do see it now, and he made quite sure to frame it that way.
Well, what's weird...
So anyways, that was a long tangent, but...
Well, what's weird about Lynch and
I hope we don't find out, it is just it's a portal to another world, and it's Bob's victim, yawn.
Well, what's weird about Lynch and Fire Walk With Me is he does something in Fire Walk With Me he doesn't do in any other of his movies, which is he over-explains things. Like for instance, in the opening...
well, one thing for sure.
Well, hang on one second. Well, with the beginning, we have the body of Teresa Banks floating down the river, but he can't just trust that image to be its own self. He has to put the words Teresa Banks underneath it. Then we have Lil doing her dance, and then we have an entire scene of Chris Isaac explaining what the dance means. And then at the end, when they say Garmonbosia, it says parentheses pain and sorrow.
That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Which is obviously something he did in post-production.
Right.
And the script calls it corn. It says, Bob, give us all, we want, I must go home, Bob, which is what they cut out of the movie, or they never shot. It says, something like, Bob, I must go home. I want all my Garmonbosia, in parentheses it says corn.
Right.
So, yeah, that was probably something he came up with in the editing room.
So bizarre. So before we go, Joel, is there any last things you want to discuss?
There was one thing. Let me see if I can remember it. It had to do with the book, Mark Frost's book.
Oh yeah.
I was just curious.
The Secret Lives of Twin Peaks.
Are you excited about the fact that it's apparently going to be like a sort of a collection of stuff? It's not going to be like a List of Seven type novel, apparently.
Am I excited for it? Sure, I'm excited for any Twin Peaks book.
Well, like for that format specifically?
Yeah, what it's supposed to be is a coffee table book. Now, I'm not too sure, but I'm hearing the price is going to be somewhere between $50 or more.
Yeah.
Which kind of bums me out, and I
coffee table book. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, and I just don't want it to be a bunch of like nothing with some new cool.
And I'm
pictures.
sure it'll come, pardon the expression, wrapped in plastic, so you can't leaf through it in the store.
Well, are there bookstores anymore? I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, yes, I'm excited for it, but I'm almost, dare I say, Yes, I'm a Twin Peaks fan. Yes, I should run out and get it. And maybe I will. Maybe I'll see the cover for it and I'll be like, yes, I am ordering that now. But there's a part of me that goes, maybe I should wait for an initial review or preview. Somebody on YouTube will do an open box and flip through it. And maybe if I just see a few pages, I'll be like, yeah, that's worth it. It's hard for me to just tell because I have been burned on so many of those types of books. That doesn't mean that I feel like I would be burned, but I just want to make sure I'm not.
Yeah. I would say, I think it's almost like different. I don't think I'm less interested and more interested in that. It's sort of different. Like reading a novel about Twin Peaks would have been interesting in one way, and this would be interesting in another. I will say this is more consistent with the way all of the Twin Peaks literature has been in the past.
That's true.
It's always been found media, like always. I think Access Guide, Cooper's Bio, Laura's Diary, and now this. It's like it's perfectly in keeping with that. So that's kind of nice.
When I first heard about the book and about like it was going to talk about the characters, I kind of had this vision of, in a very simplistic way, of just a novel, and it would be just a collection of short stories, and each story would be chapter 7, Betty Briggs, and it would just kind of like tell us about her and what happened to Major Briggs, and and just like each person would have their own little section, but that's too linear for them. So.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know. Even though I've talked to people who are incredibly skeptical about this new series, I keep telling myself, like, okay, they're heading in definitely a direction. Now, in my opinion, this is a direction where this may be fucking genius. It could be a fucking disaster. But even if it's a disaster, there's going to be amazing things in this.
And it'll be interesting.
Yeah, but like when you keep...
It's not going to be boring. It's not going to be,
But when you hear all these new actors, and like these, and it's just like, I mean, one of the things that has been discussed in the last couple months is, are these new actors being brought into Twin Peaks basically because Frost and Lynch had originally set to do 9 episodes, and now they're now they're talking about upwards to 18 or whatever it is. But maybe these new characters are the reason why it jumped another potentially 9 episodes, is to make it more fleshed out, so Showtime feels like that they're not just banking on the original cast coming back, but a collection of new and exciting fresh faces.
I don't know. I find it hard to believe that Showtime was the ones pushing for more episodes. It feels more like that was almost not a concession, because there's obviously a big benefit for them in more episodes, but it feels like it was somehow, I don't know how I'd put it exactly.
But why would Lynch and Frost...
It gives Lynch more breathing room.
Right, but why would Lynch and Frost, who
and
said...
he likes breathing room.
Who said that we spent 3 years creating these 9 perfect scripts, which I was very excited about, because to me...
Did they say that, though? I think they said the script or this story or whatever. I don't think they ever said that it was... Because from what I'm hearing, it's one big script.
Right.
It's not actually divided into episodes.
Right, and that is what I've heard, too, which is a first in Hollywood, which is basically they're going to shoot it as one big movie and then decide in post-production where to cut the episodes. That's kind of cool. That's so great.
Yeah, because even True Detective, they wrote as episodes, even though they shot it out of sequence.
Right.
They wrote each episode as an episode.
Right. Yeah, so I mean it'll be fantastic. I am so excited for this. What I'm not excited about, just real quick and kind of bringing this whole thing circular, is going to be the onslaught of not necessarily new fans, because obviously the more the merrier, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that part.
But I'm not looking forward to all the people you know, that in Hollywood or whatever, like that, do these like teeny bopper after show things for every popular, quote unquote, popular show on the CW and everything like that, getting their hands on the new Twin Peaks and trying to act pseudo intellectual about a show that they fucking know nothing about, and it's going to give David Lynch and Twin Peaks fans a fucking headache, because we've never experienced this before. We've never had a David Lynch TV show on while the internet has been in full swing. So this is like a culture shock.
You raise a great point, which is, you know, when this, how are people going to, because, how can I put this? You have something like Star Wars, there's a gigantic fandom, and it grows when a new movie comes out or a new thing comes out. But that's people joining something that's already really big. How do you handle it when you have something that's a very small cult phenomenon? And, you know, ideally, it gets big enough to the point where suddenly the people that are into it, it's like quadruples or whatever, you know, it gets much bigger by much bigger orders of magnitude. Do the original fans just kind of get lost in the shuffle? Or do people go, or is there some sort of, I don't want to say like, how would I put this? Is there going to be a way for people who are getting into it to actually kind of be directed to the places of value? You know, be it, you know, you guys or Doug or, you know, and any of us who kind of dealt with it already and kind of can be sort of good guides into the universe for people who are questions or who are curious about the history of it and stuff. And, you know, I'm throwing myself in there. I mean, I didn't watch it until years later, so I don't want to be too presumptuous. But obviously, you know,
you're a hipster.
A lot of us have, yeah, exactly right. The James, I'm banned from watching the new show, so I guess it won't be a problem. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I've been wondering that too, actually, and I'm glad you put that into words, because what's going to happen is when the people go online and they say, wow, this new Twin Peaks show, this is amazing, I got to read about it, and they do a Google, are they just going to be swept into, you know, Vox or whoever this or that is? And also, question, are those people going to hire people who are experienced with the show and are fans and want to write about it? Because so far, whenever you get a Twin Peaks recap or whatever, it's usually written by somebody who is a big fan of the show, you know? They bring somebody in who watched the show and is fond of it, and all of a sudden maybe they bring in a newbie to share it with or something. But you don't have people, you know, just going at it completely blind. And even if they are, the community's small enough that they kind of find or are found by people who are kind of, you know, familiar with the show. So yeah, are people going to Google and they're going to turn up Obnoxious and Anonymous and Doug Pine Journey Through Twin Peaks and, you know, Twin Peaks podcast and Sparkwood and 21 and Unwrapped? You know, are they going to turn up John Thorne's site? Are they going to, is all that stuff going to be, or Reflections, Brad's book, is that all going to be sitting there waiting for them? Or, I mean, Reflections probably will be, because that was a, you know, a big published release and stuff. But all the stuff that people have done online, are they going to be able to find that, or is it going to get lost in the shuffle of people who are just in it because it's on and they got to talk about it?
Well,
so I'm kind of hoping
it's going to be very
they can
clickbaity.
Rather than get swallowed up, rather than the fandom gets swallowed up, the fandom can do the swallowing up. You know, that all the new people can kind of swell that community that's already there, instead of just that getting washed away in the tide and people like reinventing the wheel, when it's like, hey, you know, there's people who've been talking about and thinking about this stuff for years, like, you know, let's hear what they have to say. I don't know.
Or
like when I got back into, that's a good, not to, you know, I'll end on this point, but when I got back into it 2 years ago, that's more or less what happened to me. It was like, wow, you know, I watched this a few years ago and I liked it and I wrote about it, but now I really want to dig deep. What do I do? And I looked and there weren't that many things to find. So I found Doug Pye, I found you guys, I found John Thorne's Above the Store site and got in touch with him. And, you know, it was like all that stuff was waiting there to be found. It wasn't buried under a bunch of crap. So anyways.
Or it could be like the new Heroes or X-Files and be completely ignored.
What was that? Oh, X-Files hasn't been doing well? ratings or whatever.
Do you see people talking all over the internet about it? I don't.
Well, I don't look for it. So yeah, actually, you do. That is true. I mean, even on Twitter or something, it's not. I never see it trending. I was a little surprised by that when somebody said it's back on. I was like, oh, I knew it was coming, but I thought when it was back.
Yeah. So who knows? I mean, Twin Peaks could come out and just can be completely ignored.
Well, I don't think it will be for two reasons. One is Showtime, and one is 1990. So the Showtime thing is like, this is a big deal for them. They have to hype this big time. They have to. It's a big investment. It's big prestige, and they can't afford to just let this be a quiet cult revival. It's got to be big. The other thing is that when the show came out in 1990, it was a pop culture phenomenon, and a lot of that had to do not so much with the ratings, which were great for the pilot, okay after that, and by the end of season 1, it was not a big, massive hit show, but the thing was, everybody in the media loved it, and they couldn't get enough, and they're the ones who made it. More than like Joe Q on the street corner, it was, the people, the journalists and the celebrities and all of that who made it this big phenomenon because they couldn't stop talking about it, and they ran the magazines and the newspapers and the TV shows, and so, therefore it became a big deal. And a lot of those same people are there now, and they're older, and it's like, this is a big story, a big moment. And maybe I should add a third factor to that, which has to do with the 1990 media blitz, which is David Lynch. David Lynch is much bigger news than Chris Carter, So I think with all those factors, I'm not saying it'll be a big hit, but I do think when it comes back, we will see a media blitz preparing people for it, And so, yeah, the question becomes, does everything get thrown out of proportion at that point, or does that core kind of remain? Who knows?
Guess we'll find out. So on that note, Joel, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for listening, because this is an audio podcast, so appreciate it. You taking the time to listen to us blabber on for about 2.5 hours. Joel, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me at thedancingimage.blogspot.com, and I'm on Twitter at Lost in the Movies, and YouTube. My channel is Lost in the Movies. Yeah, and I think that's it.
So make sure you go over to his channel and subscribe. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel on YouTube, Obnoxious and Anonymous. Also, we have a Facebook page, Obnoxious Anonymous, as well as a Twin Peaks page called Twin Peaks Worldwide, in which most of the contributors of this podcast contribute there as well. So, on that note, thank you everybody again for watching and listening. If you guys are on DugPa, why don't you reach out to the admins since they're not replying to my emails and say, hey, bring Cameron back on at least. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again, and we will see you next time. Take care.